5.5 years ago. I was doing my own demo day, and after Techstars was over, I remember the nerves. It was a really exciting time. We pumped a dedicated month into like just preparing for that 6-minute presentation. So really looking forward to seeing a bunch of your presentations later on. So I wanted to just tell you, so Mike was kind enough to give you a little bit about my background. If I go a little bit further back in my background, I did an undergrad in biology, and that's because I had no idea what I really wanted to do. But I started running a small business in college, which was really just throwing parties, and I was like, wow, that's a lot more fun than what I'm studying in school. And so I ended up going down this path around business. I did an MBA, did the management consulting, and by the end of that, I realized I was ready to take the plunge off the deep end. It took me a little longer to find those nerves, but I was ready to take the plunge off the deep end. And I finally left my job at Bain & Company on August 31st, 2008. And we were ready, me and my co-founders, to go out and raise a round, and 15 days later, Lehman Brothers collapsed. And so what we thought was going to be a nice, easy ride to fundraising ended up being, a 1.5 years plus of bootstrapping the company. But it actually was the best thing that could have happened, because there were a lot of companies around that time in 2008, just after the App Store had launched, that raised money and went shooting off into various directions. But the mobile space, the app space, so hadn't really figured itself out yet. And so a lot of these companies went off into the absolute wrong directions and have since fizzled and burned. We were forced to be very thoughtful and work closely with our customers, remain lean, and figure out what their real needs were and create a product focused around that. So when we first came together, we actually thought we were going to develop apps. We had a couple of different things we were working on, but we realized that nobody had a clue how to build a business on top of apps. It was, App Store just launched, and there was a lot of confusion. And one of the things that was central to me and my co-founders was this idea of like really using data to understand what you're doing. Me as a consumer of it, my co-founder and CTO Henry was at Microsoft for many years, built the analytics that go into their desktop apps. Our other co-founder was a big data backend systems guru. So we decided, rather than going after the gold in that mobile app gold rush, let's apply the pickaxes and shovels. And we started working with customers to figure out what it was that they really wanted. Well, we toiled a lot, and we probably spent a couple of months doing very little of much, until one day, over at actually the Holt School of Business, there was a demo camp event, right, where you had to present what you did. And I signed ourselves up for it. I went back in and said, hey, about 2 weeks from now, we got to present our platform. My co-founders laughed at me until they realized I was serious. We did a lot in those 14 days, even though we did very little the 2 months prior. And we got a basic version of our analytics platform for mobile apps up and running, and we demoed it. Well, from there, I realized we needed deadlines. How are we going to keep the momentum up? Well, I heard about a program called Techstars that was moving to Boston. It's the first time that they've moved out of Boulder, which is our home, and we decided, we got to apply to this. Well, the nice thing about even just being in the application process for an accelerator like that is that they want to see how you're revving, how you're developing every week. And so it put us into this rhythm, and we were fortunate enough to get into Techstars. We started that in spring of 2009, and from there, it wasn't just the pressure of getting into the program that kept us going and kept us on this weekly rhythm. It was all these other great companies around us who were doing a lot of great shit, and we needed to stay ahead of them. And so one of the things that Techstars really did for us was give us that rhythm to, their motto is do more faster, and I think that's something that's really maintained with us. How do we get shit done fast? Critical, especially in the early stages. Now, while we were in the program, we learned a lot, right? I had a lot of business experience, but one thing I didn't know about was startups, right? I'd never been in a startup, and Techstars really brought a lot of things to us. It brought a lot of mentor networks to us. It helped us network with other successful entrepreneurs, including folks like Dharmesh Shah from HubSpot, who had spent a lot of time in the program, Mike, and many other great people. And ultimately we could have gone out and done a lot of that ourselves, but the nice thing was it was brought to us, it allowed us to do it in a very time-efficient manner, because time is the most important thing that we have. Ultimately, we went through demo day, and it was 2009. So unfortunately, unlike today, it wasn't the same kind of fundraising environment. And so after our demo day, it took us another 6 months to put together a round. It actually took, and Joe was involved in a little bit of this, at least watching it from the from the balcony in the initial days. We had to walk away from our first angel deal in order for it to actually come together. It was a really stressful time, but we walked away because ultimately we were like, all right, you know what? We feel like we can do this on our own. We'd already bootstrapped for 1.5 years. We're like, what's another half a year? But once we did that, it actually came together, and from there on, things have been, fortunately, a lot easier. Now, there's a few things that I've learned since then, leading up to now. Before I actually jump into it, let me give you the kind of the high-level story. So, in 2009, end of 2009, beginning of 2010, we raised a $750K angel round. We remained angel funded, really lean, while the mobile app space was figuring itself out for another 1.5 years. Actually, sorry, 2 years. So we raised a second angel round a year later, and it wasn't until 2012 that we raised our first venture round. So here's the logic for us. When we were an analytics company, so what we were doing is we were helping mobile app developers understand who their users were. We knew that we could create some business from that, but we knew that wasn't a massive opportunity on its own. So by going an angel-funded route, we maintained a lot of optionality and flexibility in our business model. So we ultimately raised a round from Launchpad Venture Group here in Boston, New York Angels, Hub Angels was also involved. It was exactly the right thing for us to do because it allowed us to grow slowly while the market figured itself out. In 2012, something changed. A lot of our customers have figured out, with our help in most cases, how to get users. What does it take to engage your users, and how do you grow your user base? But they were struggling with monetization. A lot of them, for the first few years of mobile, thought, hey, you know what, I'm going to get users, and I'm going to grow revenue through mobile advertising. Unfortunately, that hadn't, and in many ways still hasn't evolved as a real business model. Instead, where people were seeing traction was through things like in-app purchases, subscriptions, commerce within apps, but they had no way of influencing those behaviors. So they were looking to us, hey, can you build us tools to nudge our users, like push messaging? That on its own wasn't a very intriguing thing to us, because that delivery channel gets very quickly commoditized over time. But we had this aha moment where we could take all that rich insight that we had about users and deliver very personalized and targeted messages. Well, then that was something special. And that helped us really grow the business, and since then we've raised about $60 million, including a $35 million round that we closed about 3 months ago. As Mike mentioned, we're now about 250 people, but the thing that I spend all my time on, I've spent at least 60 or 70% of my time on, is recruiting. It's all about the people. It's all about the people. So, that means being at events. That means networking. Some people that I met years ago, it took me, we hired somebody that started last week. We've been recruiting him for 6 years. Literally. But the point is that you're always networking. Everybody that you meet that has a spark of brilliance, keep in touch with them. It doesn't have to be, grabbing lunch with them every week, but maintain that relationship, because you never know when's going to be the right time and the right fit. So recruiting, team development is the #1 thing. Another thing that I learned is focus, because in a world where there's a lot of different opportunities and there's a lot of different things you can do, there are only a few things that you can really do well. And it's really hard to say no to all those other things, but it's just constantly knowing what is your core and coming back to it with almost every decision, including hiring decisions. Are these people going to get me to where I'm going? The product decisions. Is this product really going to get me to where I'm going? And sometimes you got to turn away customers and revenue and opportunity in order to stay focused, because the most valuable thing you have isn't the money, it's the time. So the other thing, the final thing maybe that I've really learned is understanding customers' needs is hard. And it becomes harder and harder over time. The only way you're going to be able to do that is talk to them all the time. Be out there and be on, no matter whether you're the engineering person on your team, be on customer calls. Okay? Be on as many as you can. Go on site, talk to customers, go for drinks with them, go for dinner with them. Just find opportunities to spend time with your market, and it just kind of comes, right? You get a sense for where their heads are, and it helps you see into the future. So those are a few key things. Hiring, stay focused, and focus on customers. I think have been our key focus areas as a company. And we've got a long way left to go. It feels like it's the beginning of the game for us, because what we're looking to capture is a big piece of a big market. And the last thing, and I guess I'll leave you with on that, is thinking small is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Aim big, go, focus on big. I think, in Boston, we're gonna see some multiple billion-dollar companies, and I hope a few of you guys, join us and help us follow along in that ride.
Cool.
All right.
Awesome. Just a couple of questions. A few questions. Anybody have some questions for Raj? Please don't be shy. Oh, come on, you can do better than that. I know you can. Francois, go for it. You drove all the way from Montreal. You want yourself the right to ask me questions.
I'll ask it in French. Though.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
No, but recruiting the right people when you start, which you said 6 years. I mean, which are the most in your case? Which were the most difficult people to recruit? Which are the most critical? If you,
yeah.
So what would you say?
Every time we hit a new need, it is the most challenge. Everybody's going to tell me, and I'm going to think it's the most challenging position in the world to hire for. So let me just double click on that. I just hired a head of HR. And I was told, because of the fit, the importance of fit, and all these other things, that is the most important, the most difficult hire person. I just hired before that chief revenue officer, and so I was looking for somebody who's built a company to well over $100 million. There's only a few people out there that do that. That was the most difficult hire I'm going to have to ever face. Before that, marketing. Marketing is a rare breed, and it requires somebody who's quantitative and qualitative and brings all that. And I was told by every recruiter and a lot of other people that is the most difficult hire out there today, and kind of on and on. So I think the point is, don't be discouraged by the difficulty of finding that right person. So it's, there's a lot of opportunistic stuff to do. You'll get to meet people, but ultimately you need to think about what is the biggest need that I have in my business today, and don't be discouraged. There's some superstars. The final thing to say on that, there's some superstars that were unhireable. It took me 9 months to recruit them, but we could get them.
How much time? Yes. Question. How much time do you spend hiring the future person?
I'd say I spend about 60 to 70% of my time on recruiting. It wasn't necessarily like that in the early days, but there is something that flipped, and I'll give you just, maybe this is maybe a more important part of the whole story that I didn't actually get into. When we went from, and I didn't because this is a lot of early stage, but when we went from 50 people to 100, I didn't think I could do this job. Suddenly everything was falling off the rails. The car was shaking. I was like, shit, I don't know if I'm the right guy to do this. I had to be very introspective and get a coach and leverage my mentors and realize that my entire approach was kind of like, I had to change. It was right for when we were 30 people. It wasn't right now that we're 100 people. And that's where I actually switched a lot of my time and attention to people. So call it recruiting. So there's a big effort that I need to do to bring the right executive team so that we have the leverage. And now it's a little bit less about recruiting, but my main focus as a CEO is how do I get the most out of the people I have. I've hired great product people, and sales people, and marketing people. They're going to get that. The most effective thing I can do as CEO is get the most, get full potential out of these people. So I think a lot about organizational dynamics, leadership training, effective offsites. One of the biggest skills I learned is how to run a good meeting.
Thank you. So just on that note, culture, right? So I know incredible culture here at HubSpot. They get celebrated all the time for being a great place to work.
Yeah.
How do you think about culture, and how do you create that high performance organization to get that kind of productivity out of people?
So when you're smaller,
Yeah.
culture is just kind of inherent. You don't have to define it. Everybody kind of knows it. And then we went into 2014, 18 months ago, with 60 people. And today, we're almost 200 people more. The thing that we had to do is make sure that everybody really understood what the core values of the company are. So the first part was, let's articulate them. We all kind of knew what they were, but when you're hiring new people and they're coming on board, it's hard for them to understand what's important to the company. So we articulated our core values, and then we've basically done workshops in small groups of every single person in the company to make sure that they really understand what those core values are. And not just what they understand what they are, but what do they mean in practice, right? So how does it impact the type of hiring people do? How does it impact the type of conversations you have? One of our core values is tell it like it is. So we have a lot of focus on people being candid with each other, right? And facilitate the communication, but giving example, and also rewarding people for those behaviors. So when you're promoting people, make sure that the rest of the company understands why you made those promotions, because they're in line with this person was supporting your core values. And when you have to let go of people, it's going to be, you're going to look back at your core values. So that provides an underlying structure that the rest of culture can be built on.
Cool, thank you, Raj. Yeah, please, Steve.
Maybe building on Steve's improvement, have you found that there's a common quality or set of qualities that makes for a good hire at the early stage especially, but even as you progress, that regardless of the role, is there a set of qualities that lets you think that this person is probably going to work out, or that has shown that? Was it random?
No, so this is going to be, I'm going to start with my process, and then I'll try to get to what I've learned from it. But I've been using, I think you have to have a methodology around recruiting, especially when you're going to do it at scale. The methodology I use is this book called Who by a guy named Jeff Smart. And the basic piece of it is that you're trying to really understand if somebody is able to define and achieve their objectives consistently over time. And so there's an interview process that I live by, and I've taught it to the entire company. Anybody that's hiring anyway, you can't hire until you've kind of gone through this list. You're creating a scorecard for what are you trying to achieve, and then you're marking everything against that. But here's the important thing. You understand for every single job that they have, what they set out to achieve and how they did it. And then there's a little trick that works great. You ask them, all right, how would your manager at that point, how would they describe what you did? And then you ask them, what's her name? And then importantly, how do you spell the name? What are they going to tell me? And what are they going to tell me when I talk to them, right? And suddenly you get a very different set of answers versus the, whatever, I can make up bullshit. No, this guy's going to talk to my manager. I better be straight. And focus on objectives and how good they are setting and achieving objectives. And so, if you can find somebody who's results-oriented and can do that well, that's kind of like the core thing that cuts across any functional area.
Cool. Two more questions. We're going to transition. My friend over here.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to come to you. We're gonna wrap up and start going to pitch time.
My name is David. You talked about folks, right? For a startup perspective, you know, how you see the balance between folks versus being folks versus realizing that you have to make change in your business plan, business model to be able to, you know, accomplish success. How you see the balance for a startup?
Yeah. The way I think of it is, until you've decided to make that change, right? You're on something, right? And like your co-founders, early team members, they need clear direction, right? So make it as clear as possible. This is the direction. Now, you're always going to be mulling other things. You're going to be figuring out whether there's enough market there, whether you've got the right competitive advantage there and all that, and whether there's another adjacency to try. You're going to figure out what your tests are to understand that. But while you're doing all that, you've got to have some kind of clear focus. And until you've decided to change it, that's your clear focus.
All right, last one. Yeah, please.
Okay. You mentioned keeping in touch with your customers, which is, I think everyone thinks is very important. I know an engineer who used to work at Gillette designing their razors, and nobody in that department had any beards. So can you use your own employees to test the product itself, or is it more subtle than that? Is it because when you become so familiar with it that we really can't see the problems that the users are having?
So we have a little bit of a nuanced thing because we're an enterprise software company versus a consumer software company. So our employees aren't going to give us the right insight. You know, I do believe what, you know, the whole, if Henry Ford had asked what people wanted, right, you know, he would have made faster horses, right? So just, listen to your customers, but you do have to guide them and use your own vision, and test different things. So now when you come back to can you use your employees? Again, I can't probably answer intelligently like what a consumer company should do. I can tell you that, you know, when you're doing a poll, you're trying to get just general sentiment, you know, definitely leverage your people. You're probably going to get like a 60 or 70% right answer by just talking to 20 random people, some inside your company, maybe some outside. But you absolutely do have to go outside your company as well to get a rounded picture, because otherwise you're going to be pigeonholed.
Raj, thank you so much.